So we've discussed in previous videos one method of solving quadratic equations, and that was by factoring. Now we're going to solve quadratic equations by the square root property. And we've actually discussed this in class a little bit when we had some other items. We just have to be careful because sometimes we can end up with an I, imaginary number, which is okay. But also we have to pay attention to our signs. Remember that where I take the square root of both sides to solve, I have to take the plus or minus sign of the square root of my number. Because remember, things such as a -3 squared is a +9, as well as a 3 squared is a +9. Therefore, when I have the x squared is equal to 9, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the square root of both sides, but that number I need to take the positive or negative. This way I end up with both possible answers, a positive and a -3, which I show right here as being the values that can give me a 9. So let's try some examples of this. So first we have x squared is equal to 29. So on this one, I'm just going to take the square root of both sides, but I have to remember to take the plus or minus. So this leaves me with x is equal to a positive or negative square root of 29. Now, if possible, I would really like to be able to simplify that. 29 doesn't simplify. So I end up that x is equal to a negative square root of 29, as well as x is equal to the positive square root of 29. So I still have those two answers because I'm working with an x squared in my problem. And there they are. So let's look at another example. 2x squared plus 144 is equal to 0. Well, when I'm doing this, I have to have the square by itself on one side of the equal sign. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 144 from both sides. This way I get 2x squared is equal to a -144. Then I'm going to divide both sides by a 2. And I will get that x squared is equal to a -72. So I have a square equal to a number, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides, remembering to take the positive or negative square root of that -72. So what I have is x is equal to a positive or negative square root of a -72. Now remember, excuse me, that the negative is actually going to come outside as an I. So I get x is equal to a plus or minus I square root of 72. I can break that 72 down. It's not a perfect square, but I can break it down because 72 is the same thing as 36 times 2. And I know what the square root of 36 is. It is 6. So I'm going to have plus or minus 6i. Notice the I is behind the number here. Square root of 2. Now if you're not sure about that square root of 72, come over to the side. And I know that that's 9 times 8. Well, I can take the square root of 9. 8 is 4 times 2. I can take the square root of both of these because the square root of 9 is 3, square root of 4 is 2, leave this other 2 back underneath the radical. 3 times 2 gives me that 6 square root of 2. Square root of 2. Now I do need to stick the I in there. I was just showing you that with 72 there are other ways of breaking it down. Okay, let's look at another example. I have x minus 8, quantity, squared is equal to 24. Now notice that I have the square equal to a number. I don't want to FOIL this together, okay? I want to start right where I'm at. I'm going to take the square root of both sides, plus or minus the square root of 24. So what that's going to give me is that x minus 8, because remember the square and the square root cancel, is equal to the plus or minus the square root of 24. Now I want to see if I can break down that 24, which I can, because remember that 24 is the same thing as 4 times 6, and I can break that 4 down into a 2, square root of 6. But notice I've still got this x minus 8 on the other side. So I've got x minus 8 is equal to a plus or minus 2 square root of 6. So what I have to do is I'm going to add 8 to both sides. Be careful. I cannot add this 8 to this 2, because think about a radical similar to a variable. This one has a radical, this one doesn't. So I can't combine these two. So all I can do is I have 8 plus or minus 2 square root of 6, and that's equal to x. Notice I put the 8 in front. I usually want to put the plus or minus part at the end. I also want to try to put that radical at the end. So I have that x is equal to 8 plus or minus 2 square root of 2. It's not a nice number like we're used to, but it is actually the solution for this equation. So try some of the square root properties and let me know if you have questions.